Just doing this for an experiment, you see.
CBS Radio Mystery Theater presents. Come in. Welcome. I'm E.G. Marshall.
Well, I know I'm going to have to put that in the records just to keep YouTube off my case here. That's just a little bit about dabbling here. I've always been fun. Oh, by the way, this is the zombie from Rosewood, California. Weaver John. See how you doing? This is the 20th of October, 2021. And I've always been fascinated about radio mystery theaters. Coming across them as a young kid, listening to the last of them back in the 80s, especially the 80s and early 90s when they took them off. The voice of E.G. Marshall had been silenced and with other radio hosts taking over the CBS Mystery Hour. Of course, on KNX, during that time, a local station out here in Los Angeles, California, had a hell of a market to tap into, including the CBS Radio Network. Certain nights and certain days, we would actually listen to the radio a great deal. On our car radios and our portable transistors, not to mention our stereos at home. Turn off the television. Of course, television was a lot of things to see and do, or actually a lot of things to be brainwashed by. But the radio mysteries would give the people something to imagine if they could. Now, as I understood it through my own history and learning through it, and not to mention experiencing it through it, it's nothing like listening to a good radio program. Of course, you can listen to the actors on stage, you close your eyes, and you're listening to whatever is on the screen, not being projected out of your sound systems. But of course, you have the special effects being played out, and you have the music. And the tempo of the music tells you what's happening. Sometimes all that, well, I don't know. Sometimes the music would be following the action, and sometimes they wouldn't be. They'd be either like theatrical, dramatic, or short-lived. And you really couldn't understand and hear the action taking place because everything had to be so visual. But in the radio, we were dealing with an environment that dealt strictly with sound. Now, we were back in the 1800s, late 1800s, when they're developing the telecommunication systems, voices coming across albums, singing happening these days, crooning, and now you have the mystery programs coming out there and adventures. People will be reading in the printed periodicals, but now they can listen to it. Before they actually had the films generated, and when they started watching the films, it didn't exactly quite take away the mystery of a good radio program, because you can close back wherever you are and enter a world where you're listening to things happen. Sherlock Holmes trying to solve his mysteries left and right. He had various voice actors. Of course, he had Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. But the thing that actually gave you chills, at least for me it was when I'm hearing that beginning from the CBS Mystery Theater. Now, it's one thing when you hear the flourishes every so often of the album or the recordings of War of the World. And listening to another program that did the War of the Worlds, which is still being played throughout the internet. And it's their annual thing, I know. You gotta... Hold on a second. I tell you, when you happen to get the CRS coming in, can't remember stuff, it really interferes with memories left and right. Word association regarding the broadcast of War of the Worlds, the one name that keeps popping up is Wells. H.G. Wells and the War of the Worlds. But what we're talking about back in the late 30s, that has still become the hit to this day, it's Orson Welles' voice in the Mercury Theater. Listening to the flourishes of the Mercury Theater, and then some of the music that you can actually still listen to if you happen to go to YouTube and pull up Stardust and listen to it. Or listen to the slow dancing music that they have out there. And you listen to all the great memories that happens. But the ones that keep haunting you the most, that stick in your mind, it's always the ones with the interesting intros to them. Now, I hadn't listened to the old serials concerning Flash Gordon or anything else like that. No. There's the FBI. Or, well, of course, being an American, I had to listen to the Lone Ranger. Or something about the Texas Rangers. I listened to about that one. A lot of good radio programs out there. But when it came down for Halloween, when it came down for October, when it came down for certain days throughout the year, there's always the CBS murder mystery and the introductions that they would have. That's always that opening of the door and having you squeak like crazy because it hadn't been oiled in years. And it's opening up into this chamber. You don't even know where this chamber is. You can just imagine this high chair, this padded high chair. And here's E.G. Marshall folding his arms. Good evening. Welcome. I'm E.G. Marshall. I can hear it and see this image in my mind, looking at the radio audience as they're watching this. And then he's leaning back, or actually leaning forward, in his hands and temple here to explain the next story. And explain that our voice actors are this person, and this person. Usually at the end of the film. After when you've already been through the ringer. Because listening to this required concentration and imagination. It did not require watching flashbang. It did not require hidden actions. It didn't require anything like that. All of your brains to be used to create the scenery and the images, what the characters looked like, what their facial reactions were. What were they trying to do? The music often gave you a sense of foreboding. And foreboding would be similar to Disney's Haunted Mansion, wouldn't it? Of course, you hear the laughter in the background. I seriously doubt that. But I had listened to the radio programs a great deal. And I was grateful that they actually had them on the internet. A lot of the programs, when they got past the copyright materials, they were actually able to be put into public domains and therefore be able to listen to them. But after 75 years of being private, they become the public. something to be thinking about, isn't it? But that's another time for another video on that one, isn't it? I just want to say that I give thanks to E.G. Marshall. I give thanks to the legacy of the War of the Worlds and the Mercury Theater, the CBS Radio Drama Hours, and everybody else who created imagination just by talking and letting the words roll off the tip of their tongues, either in excitable syllables or the most monotone voice of ever. Isn't that relaxing? Isn't that relaxing? You're listening to the sound of my voice as I'm about to fall off the damn chair. But you don't have to see this, do you? Unless you're watching the video on YouTube, seeing a guy doing this as he's leaning against the chair and is about to fall off.